Everyone. This is Tuesday, September 6th meeting of our Teaching and Learning Committee. First item of business is verification that the meeting's been properly posted.
Yes, it's posted.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is request to approve the teaching and learning minutes from the August 2nd committee meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Moore. Any questions, corrections, or concerns? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, 5-0. Thank you. The next item on the agenda are two field trip requests. And I think we'll start with the DECA request. Mrs. Landish?
Sure, yes.
Thank you.
So both field trips you have before you, the DECA is our national competition. So our advisors could not be here this evening to represent, but just to give you guys a background, the national competition, maybe only a handful of students would qualify each year, but nonetheless, this is a pretty annual occurrence for the system, and just looking for approval for that national competition. This year, you can see it's in Orlando, Florida in April. If you want to, as they are approved together, if that's how the motion is presented, I do have Joey Highland here. He was able to make it this evening, so thank you. He is the West Choir Director, and so with the choir performance at the Lincoln Center, this will not have any school days missed. This will happen in June, so again, seeking approval for that trip as well.
Maybe I just have a clarifying question on the DECA request, if we could start with that one. For similar circumstances, or is it just applicable to sports or other clubs, do we always request the advance approval for this, or is it a qualifying event that would not require that approval?
It's a yes and. So yes, we would ask for that to fall underneath, but as you know, some competitions, right, they qualify up to the time, so there are times when the board would perhaps be asked to approve something that like happens in a quicker turnaround. But this is known because, right, it's the national competition. What's that? Go ahead and go.
I'm sorry. The policy does indicate that if there are competitions that occur annually, that the chaperones request the trips as soon as applicable. So they know this is going to happen in April, so they are requesting it in case we have kids to go. Trying to follow the language of the policy.
Okay. Any other questions? Or specifically on the DECA field trip? Okay. We could move on to the choir field trip unless we see some, well, why don't we just take the DECA one and then we can talk about choir? And take one
I
action?
mean, do you want to?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's up to you if somebody wants.
Let's separate them.
Separate?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll separate it from here on out. I think that would be probably a good idea.
Okay, be looking for a motion to approve the DECA field trip request. Not that hard.
I am so moved.
Moved by Mr. Zenobia. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Moore. Any further discussion? Oh, yes, Mr. Moore.
So first, I want to welcome our students and teachers back for our school year. It was a great joy to see our students with beautiful smiles and the teachers opening their classroom doors and welcoming our babies on September 1st in the school district of Waukesha. So I'm super excited about that. But in regards to DECA, I actually did DECA in high school, and so it is I'm a little biased, but it was a very important event for me, and it was very life-changing. So I am totally for allowing our students to get that same experience. So.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes 5-0. Now we could move on to the choir request.
So again, if there are any questions from the board, Mr. Highland is here. He could certainly answer them for you. Otherwise, again, as presented, the choir trip for West High School to visit the Lincoln Center performance in New York, and the tour is outlined, coming up in June on the 23rd through the 27th.
I'll move for approval as presented.
Second.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thanks. Run fast. Yep, run away.
Thank you.
All right, next item on our agenda is an opportunity for public comment. We have one speaker tonight, so that individual will be notified at 3 minutes, but allowed up to 5 minutes to complete their comments. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. This school board and this committee does not endorse any comments made by members of the community here tonight. We'd like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in respectful and productive ways and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used, and the area behind the speaker and podium will be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phone at this time. Our speaker tonight is Paul Reese.
Good evening. I first want to apologize. Last month I confused my teacher/activist's names. I said Monica Whaley. I meant to say Sarah Whaley. She's the one that wore the black trans lives shirt to a kindergarten class that thought that was appropriate. Also, I want to talk about, speaking of, since they bring this into our schools, speaking of homosexuality, I wanted to address it in a form of critical thinking as opposed to what goes on in our schools, groupthink. We don't think critical about these things. We think it's a group thought that's demanded. So homosexuality, it has to fall into two competing thoughts of ideas, either creation or evolution. And where does it fit best? Because this is what's being brought to us, so it's something that should be examined. Critical thinking isn't just answering a question, it's knowing how to ask a question to begin with. Does this fall into either of these two camps, and how so? Well, one of the cornerstones to evolution is survival. You have to survive. And the other thing is reproduction. You have to reproduce in order to evolve. These are cornerstones that Darwin stated long ago, not that long ago, but when he stated his thing, that these were a cornerstone, a tenet to evolution. But people want to say that evolution is something that we don't, why do we see homosexuality so much in people when you don't see it in other things? And they would say, well, humanity is pretty new, so that's why it's there. It's a dead end, therefore it's kind of a genetic mistake. So it's there because humanity is so new. But that's not really the way evolution works. Evolution doesn't have to come up with new things every time according to its theory. An example, if I cut myself, my blood coagulates. If a deer cuts itself, its blood coagulates. Every living creature has this happen. It is a part of, according to evolutionists, this is a part of something that was solved long ago and it can't move on without it. Sexuality is the same way. It would have started long ago and would have been taken care of long ago on how it would move forward. In other words, if something couldn't reproduce, it wouldn't reproduce and therefore would end. It isn't a matter of caring. It isn't a matter of emotion. It is a matter of factual need to reproduce, to go on. It is a difficult thing for evolutionists to get around. This is a problem for them. They can't get around this idea where this to move on and to pass genetic information, it has to produce itself. It has to be reproductive, and homosexuality is a dead end. So where does Christianity fall into? Where does creation fall into this? Well, God said, be fruitful and multiply. He said, first he created things and he called it good.
2 minutes.
The way it was. And then he said, be fruitful and multiply. This gives us a drive to do something that we wouldn't naturally do, is produce. If you were homosexual and this was a natural act, you wouldn't care to reproduce. It would be an okay thing. There's thought, why would you care? Why would you want to go on with this? Why would you carry this notion on? Bob and Bob are a dead end. Bob and Bob would be fine with that. But there's still a notion with a lot of them to reproduce. And that's because God gave us that command. It is that simple. You don't see, an example is something you don't see in the natural world is you don't see buck hunting coming up. You don't see a group of bucks frolicking in the woods together trying to reproduce. It doesn't happen naturally. And you would see, if this was a natural mistake, you would see it evenly across the animal kingdom. Everything would be the same. Within the margin of error, you would see all these things across the kingdom, the animal kingdom, and you don't see that. It's just in humanity, and it's the fall of humanity, and it leads to believe in sin. Right, Joe? Is that good with you? You following?
Mr. Reese?
Okay. I'm not the one making faces here. Joe is. At you. So, anyways, thanks for your courtesy.
Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda. The next item is discussion on reading state statute, educational process goals. And I'll turn it over to Mrs. Landish.
I'm just going to let you go right to it, Melissa Yao. Perfect.
All right. Good evening. I am here for the yearly update of our early literacy screeners and assessments that we do here in the school district of Waukesha. And so in 4K through first grade, we use the PALS assessment. That's the Phonological Awareness Literacy Screener. And we also use then in second grade, we use the MAP, the Measure of Academic Progress, for our early literacy screener. We've been using PALS to do our early literacy screening since the 2012 school year. That is when the state required that everyone use the PALS assessment. In 2015, they opened it up and said that you could choose any screener that you would like. We thought that the PALS assessment is a good indicator of early phonological and phonemic awareness for students, so we have continued to use that assessment. This year, one of the things that we are updating is a communication to families prior to the assessment to let them know that the window is coming up for their students. And then after the assessment has happened, we will continue to send out a notification to parents about how they can get those results and information to help them understand what those results mean. Also this year, we are putting into place in the middle of the year that any student that did not meet the benchmark window on the PALS assessment will be given that assessment again the middle of the year, so that we have that additional check and balance besides what teachers are doing inside the classroom as well. Any questions?
Thank you. Ms. Kozlowski.
Thank you. So I was going through this policy, and a couple questions came to mind for me when we're taking a look at achievement, the decline in achievement, especially, 2015, I think, is as far back as I've taken a look at it. And per the policy, we are putting in milestones and metrics to measure. Where do we see those, and how are we applying them? Because one of the things too, right, we're doing KPIs. is this something that we need to have as a KPI managing progress, and what are we doing? So we have learning loss, we know that we have a decline, we've got a policy that's been in place, and I'm just really curious as to how are we managing to the policy to ensure that we are reaching these kids and managing appropriately.
Right. We currently do not have a KPI around the early literacy. That is something that we could put in place. All of our buildings do look at that as a part of their ongoing measurement and their data delves, looking at where students are at. It's also one thing that is early in 4K, our theory of action goal is around PALS assessment, looking at students' knowledge of early literacy sounds. And last year, our students went from the developmental range at the end of the year is a 7 through 8, and our students on average hit 15. So that was an area that we were really looking at, because we know that in order for our students to be ready in 3rd grade, those predictabilities, we need to be hitting them as early as we can. And so that's something that we're looking at. We don't currently have a KPI around that indicator that we would be presenting to you in the community, but it is something that is looked at in the buildings that we are taking even more interest in, and really studying how we can use the PALS assessment to really guide instruction in the classroom, because there is a great alignment to that. Thank you. Uh-huh.
I also, Ms. Kozlowski, want to add, our teachers have always done an excellent job of really breaking down this data in their classroom and using it to guide next instructional steps. I think what I'm encouraged about that I'm seeing is sort of increasing the student agency in the academic testing preparation and the academic disposition that we're trying to build in our students. And I'm also encouraged by, thanks to both Melissa Yao and Jennifer Gennerman, who you will meet later on tonight, I'm encouraged by the more overt parent communication that we're sending, because we know it takes a village. And so there's just really great, clear communication to families outlining what skills are assessed at each grade level, especially for the littlest learners, because as you know, it's probably hard to convince a 5K kiddo about the importance of per se test. But I feel really confident I've always felt confident about our teachers and the way they're handling the data, and I'm just really encouraged about inviting the students to be scholars themselves in their academic preparation, as well as their parents, so parents and guardians.
Go ahead.
And just to follow up, so the policy also mentions that when we're identifying a student who's falling behind, that we are assigning someone. Who is that?
So about 2 years ago, we worked out in our universal schedule. We have 4 days a week, 30-minute intervention and enrichment block, so that we have time in our day where students have some level of intervention if they are needing that. So we have different buildings who have different levels of support. So in Title buildings, they have additional staff who help with interventions. In those buildings, there are also classroom teachers providing intervention, and in buildings that do not have Title, it is the classroom teacher. Sometimes there are interventionists as well. This year, we have 2 buildings through ESSER funds that we have an interventionist in. We're trying to look at that. Of course, we always want to focus on universal, because we know that the more strategic we are universally, the goal is to not need intervention, but we do still have students for different reasons who may be needing that, and looking at what layered systems of support we can be putting in.
Okay.
So those are a few of them.
I would offer a recommendation to consider a KPI. I don't know how we would measure it or what that would look like, but understanding that reading comprehension at this age is the most critical, right, for future success, and we measure KPIs at a high school level and a lot of other areas. But when we're taking a look at the age and the impact and importance of this age group, K through 2nd grade, 3rd grade,
Yeah.
we may want to consider, what does this population look like? How many students are we identifying? What is their progress? Where does that go? I don't have a map on that, on how we would take a look at it, but it is something that is potential for us to have as a KPI.
We could definitely do some work on that and bring some ideas to this team about what could be an early literacy indicator for our 4K through first grade, because second grade we do report out at in that map, but we can do that.
I think it's worth
Good
looking
ideas.
at.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Melissa, for joining us today. I think that I'm appreciative for the information that you're giving to us, and I also agree with Mrs. Kozlowski about that. KPI would if it's okay, that's something that hopefully we can look into. But I had a question about the assessment about students who do meet for the PALS. They meet they exceed, or they show proficiency in the fall, that they don't have to take it in winter. They automatically take it in spring, and that's fine. But my question is for it doesn't have to be a PALS thing, I guess, but more on the teacher level. For those students who maybe show proficiency in the fall, is there some type of metric where the teacher can determine in winter, just by their own classroom data, that, okay, where are students at? How do I know that we're on track to meet those progress and those gains, so that come spring, we're constantly climbing up towards progress? Because one thing I would hate is for us to see a student proficient in the fall, and we don't examine them in the winter, and then they take a big dip, and come spring, it's not looking so shiny as it was in the fall. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And it's helpful for the teacher to determine, okay, am I on track to, especially a teacher who wants to be held accountable like myself, are we on track to deliver the best results for kids? And that requires data throughout the year.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, so our teachers have multiple ways that they are assessing students universally in the classroom. One of those are through their small groups that they have in literacy, where they're working with students in small groups, and also through individually conferring with students. We have running records, another measurement of looking at reading and giving you information about where a student is at. We also, in our benchmark phonics, have ongoing assessments that teachers are doing in each of the units as well. So there's multiple different ongoing universal assessments that are happening at that classroom level.
Anything else? Mr. Zenobia?
Yes, thank you. You had mentioned a student needing additional help on the intervention level, getting 4 days, 30 minutes a day. Generally speaking, that was the thing?
Generally, yeah.
Okay. Is that what's being defined here as the additional layer of support that students are receiving? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. How many students, roughly, I don't know if you know the number offhand, but that take the tests in the fall, and then you feel they need to be reassessed in the winter? I mean, what is that number or percentage that
Well, this
we're?
will be the first year that we are requiring it. It has always been optional, but we just want to make sure that we are exhausting all of our means and different measures to be looking at our students. And when and as the policy states, we use PALS as one of the indicators, and then we make sure that, we give another, assessment if we see that they're falling behind in letter sounds assessment. We're going to dig a little bit further so we can make sure that we also align that intervention to where that skill deficit is, so we can target that and get them in. So we make sure we use that kind of as that first layer to look deeper into our students, because there might be a student who isn't feeling well that day, and we might, have a false negative. Could also sometimes happen with, false positives, that a student does better on something. And so we want to make sure that we just aren't using, one data point or one date and time to understand our students. But that's what we do. We use that as kind of that first layer of indication. And then we do some further assessing to see, where are the students at? Where do we really need to target in, so that we can make sure that we accelerate our students' growth?
In addition to that, one other question. Is there any type of measurement or understanding that some students are learning to read more through phonics while others are more, hard language or another method? Is there any measurement of that at that level? I'm sure there is in the classroom, but what I'm saying is that captured, do we have a sense of how students are learning to read
Well-
at any grade level, but, obviously
I mean,
first,
those are
second,
things
third?
that we look at. Research says that teaching students phonemically through phonics will not hurt any student. It will only help those who do need to learn that way, and that is the only way that they would learn. So that is one of the reasons why when we were looking at our comprehensive system, we wanted a more robust resource to help us in that area. That was an area that we found was not enriched enough, and so we're starting to see success with our students with that program to help us. And like I said, it helps and supports all students, but those who need it, you cannot get around not teaching phonics that way to them.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Landish.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, Ms. Kozlowski, around your suggestion around the KPI. The suggestion is clear, don't get me wrong. My clarification is this. We did have some initial conversation around PALS when we were developing the KPIs. I just wanted to point that out. Similarly, when we had conversations around MAP and decided not to use MAP and just use forward. So I guess this is twofold. We can absolutely make available and talk about our PALS data at any time, just like we would MAP, and not have it a KPI. Or if the board really wants this as a KPI, we would have to come back to the process, go for board approval, and do that. So I just want to be clear of the ask, I guess.
Yeah, so don't get me wrong, I don't want to build KPIs for the sake of having a KPI. But what I do know is how critical this period is as a stepping stone to the academic success of our kids as their reading readiness at age level, so they're not further behind. I don't know what that looks like. That would be, what I would look for you to say, hey, this is where we are, but I don't want to throw numbers on a piece of paper for doing all of that. I want to be able to measure the success of our students and be able to highlight where we can help that, what are we doing with the information, how do we grow it, how do we not, what percent of the population is impacted. I don't have that information. So yes, to your point, I don't want to just create something. I just want us to be smart, but this is data and information that we have talked about a lot on how critical at the age level this is for their future.
Any other comments? I'm just going to add, too, that in addition to the KPIs that are a standing item on our agenda, we absolutely have and will take the opportunity to review standardized test scores as they kind of occur throughout the year, and that's an important trend piece that we'll continue to look at. So it doesn't mean that just because one test isn't reflected in the KPIs that we won't be looking at it. And that those conversations may lead us to say, hey, this is maybe a more useful metric than something that we've already picked. But I appreciate what you're saying about that, Carrie, because I think it's important that we're keeping an eye on it. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I look
Appreciate
forward
that.
to sharing that information with you.
All right, moving on to our content areas, we'll be talking about math tonight, and I see Rachel Herman is joining us. And we had an opportunity to review the presentation from Dan Paczynski regarding the integrated math sequence. So I'll hand it over to the two of you for an introduction.
Thank you, and I guess I will start on this one and just thank Dan Paczynski, right, for the background that he gave you, not just in this video, but just the real way that he has strengthened our complete math department. As you know, you voted on his advancement as principal at Randall STEM. And so I just wanted to thank him, and Rachel will take it from here until we find out who's going to get into that leadership role next, but just wanted to thank him for his work thus far.
If you haven't yet seen Dan, he has had a smile on his face since he has stepped foot in Randall STEM. So, yeah, very much miss him already, but excited for him in his new journey. So yeah, I'm here to talk about the integrated 3 course sequence. So you got a chance to hear from Dan about the 3 potential course offerings. In addition to your executive summary, in your executive summary, you had Appendix D, which had many of the celebrations around our integrated 1 course, which ran this past year. And so I know we've talked a little bit about the metrics of success. How will we know that this new model is actually working? And so hopefully you got a chance to see some of the highlights of that with the purchase of Agile Minds, that guaranteed curriculum, within its first year of implementation, we saw some really great successes that we're really proud of. So I'll take any questions that you have, but again, I think Dan was pretty clear in his presentation.
I'll get us started. I have actually a few questions about the integrated 3 track and some of the options there. And it looks like you put a lot of thought into it, and I understand how the trigonometry component kind of feeds the pre-calc track. Just kind of looking at what our students would have had to take in the previous model to get to Calc BC was actually 1 additional class than what it looks like right now with the integrated 3. But my question around all that is, if you look at the different mappings, is since integrated math 3 with stats feeds any path, and then the question of how many kids are getting to integrated math 3 that are going to continue beyond it, how do those classes shape up in terms of size?
Sure. So all of our students will take an integrated Math 3 course. So all of our students will take one of those 3 pathways. In terms of size, that integrated Math 3 with statistics is most closely aligned to what was formerly Algebra 2. And so I think that's where we're going to see most of our students populate, especially in the upcoming year with its first year of implementation. That quantitative reasoning course, that's really designed for students who haven't yet decided what their college and career pathway might be. And so that's going to lend itself to, if you look behind you, this course sequence, it's really lending itself to those multiple college and career opportunities that for a student who might be going into trade school, might not really know what they want to do, it's broad enough that it covers a lot of mathematical concepts, but it's not tying them into that calc pathway. That integrated Math 3, that is really our accelerated math course that's really designed to prepare kids to be in that accelerated Calc AB, Calc BC track. And so in terms of the numbers and the sections, currently in most of our schools, we only run 1 typical section of that Calc BC, that high level calc. Obviously our goal is, again, I know you heard Dan talk about it in the video, our goal is to get more seniors to take senior level math classes. And so to get more students to take that Calc BC, to get more students to see math as being applicable to their career pathway. And so after that quantitative reasoning, if that's something that they've chosen, even though they're not technically required to take that 4th year of mathematics, to see a class like industrial math, or to see a class like functions or discrete math, something that might be really applicable to their career pathway, is something that we're trying to appeal to.
I don't know what and thank you for that. I appreciate the thought that goes into that. And I know that the different flavors of math are going to be attractive to different types of students. When I look at the pre-calc offering, what I would think is that the majority of students who are going to go down that calc pathway are going to come into high school with integrated 1 or integrated 1 and 2 already under their belt. So it doesn't seem likely, or maybe it's just an unusual circumstance, that someone would go down the Math 3 with stats and then hop over to the pre-calc, because that's an extra class, where if they're taking an integrated Math 3 with trig, they're getting, and that's a beast of a class. If we're doing trig and pre-calc, or algebra 2 and pre-calc in 1 year, which is right now 2 full year math classes.
Yes
But-
and no. We have at West a model that's running similar to what this looks like. And so this is an option that expands what that model looks like at West to all of our different schools.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering, I guess what I'm wondering is the quantitative reasoning and the integrated math with stats ultimately are feeding the same pathway, because I think it's going to be a rare student that goes down the I3 with stats and jumps over to the pre-calc pathway, because that's an extra class. And so I don't expect that pre-calculus class is going to be in high demand, which may also limit the ability for kids to jump off track. And that's my other concern when we have limited demand for certain things that are kind of the entry point for a path. How do we continue to offer that? And so I guess I'm just kind of challenging the thought process of, is the quantitative reasoning and the integrated with stats basically serving the same population, and could that be done differently? And
Yep.
do you know where I'm going with that?
I do. I think that the integrated Math 3 with statistics, looking at that course with the integrated Math 3 with trigonometry, the team did have quite a bit of discussion. I understand what you're saying, that you're thinking it's unlikely that that student would move into pre-calc. I would say that for many of our teachers, with 2 pretty big initiatives in our district, one is our Avid push for all students to take a stretch class, and 2 is our counselors really talking to students about that college bound. That calc option does become pretty desirable for students, and so I do think while a student going into integrated Math 3 with statistics might not be thinking about that calc track at that point, that still does open the door should they want to. And I do think we will have students who do decide that they want to move into that pre-calc track, and that's a course that will prepare them to do so. So again, and I know in Dan's presentation, he talked about those 2 courses, while that integrated with trigonometry is going to move at a much more accelerated pace. That integrated 3 with statistics will still prepare a student to enter into that pre-calc and calc land. And so I think we will still have a section minimally that runs of that, which again, even if that's 25 students at each of our schools, that's still a goal, that we want them to take those higher level math classes.
I think thank you. And the only piece missing for me in that path is the trigonometry that's necessary for calculus. So if a student does go down that path, we would have to be sure that the pre-calc actually pulls up the trig, because you can't do calc. I mean, you can do a little bit of calc without trig, but you can't really do calc without trig. So that part might be missing a little bit. The other maybe question or clarification, just based on what some of your assumptions are about numbers of students down different pathways, is that with the integrated Math 3 with trig, that's going to accelerate our high-achieving math students, our STEM students, actually faster than they had in the past, where more of them are going to get to Calc BC. And in the past, I know we've had trouble offering sections of Calc BC, so have you thought that through in terms of what that's going to look like, and if we can offer it? Because we don't want students to get there and then find out that they're driving across town to take that class, or doing it online.
Yeah, and currently, to your point, that is the model that we have. When we only have 5 or 6 students at some of our sites, that's unfortunately where we have to do the WebEx in, drive here, take it through eAchieve. And so we are hopeful that we will be able to offer sections of Calc BC. in addition, through our partnerships with Carroll and some of our other colleges where we partner through ECCP, again, students can take above and beyond our offerings, which is also something that we celebrate. But yes, we are hopeful that we will be able to offer sections and not have students have to drive across town where, again, that's not always accessible for all of our students.
Thank you. And I appreciate that this is more of a discussion, kind of overview of what's coming. I think it would be really important for us to kind of monitor the enrollment. I know that's your job, right? I'm not trying to get in your way, but just to kind of understand, are we offering too many options? Are we offering enough? You know, are we kind of seeing a split in a couple different directions? And or maybe from the counselor's perspective, are we limiting any students by having too many options at Integrated Math 3? But I appreciate the thought that went into this.
I can say just from the teacher's perspective, the Integrated Math 3 options were not of concern to them. What sometimes becomes a concern is when you start to have too many options in that last section, that fourth year, because now you start to have teachers who might have 4 or 5 different prep periods, and you start to have students who, again, don't know what to pick because there's a plethora of options. So deciding which of those courses and which of those pathways most align to, right, the research behind what fields are our students going into, what are the top math fields right now that are demanding in, you know, the fields, et cetera. That's where we're going to have some heavy discussion.
And I know a lot of our students, or many that I'm familiar with, are opting for AP Stats over Calc BC. And I see the statistics as one of the 3 options. And, you know, if I could wave my magic wand, that would be a requirement. But it's not going to sit well with everybody. But statistics is just so important. So you hate to have some kids missing it because they're choosing a different path. But I think that quantitative reasoning does have some basic statistics and probability stuff in it too. So that's just a really important area. All right, sorry, I'm monopolizing. Any other questions or comments about the math track? Mr. Zenobia.
Just one question on the declining enrollment of seniors into math courses. It says about 45%. How long have you been watching or monitoring that trend? How has it been steady? Has it been sharp decline? Or?
Yeah, I would say it's accurate to say we've been monitoring it since the start of the curricular design process that math underwent. So for about 3 years. I can't speak to prior to that. It's definitely something that I could get to you to see if that has been the track past that, but for the last 3 years is where we've pulled that data from when we started this curricular revision.
Is there any idea of how much has stepped down? Has it been, I mean, was it 40% 3 years ago? You know what I mean? Like, or you're not sure?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look that information up.
Okay. And again, the integrated, that design process is fairly new. That started 3 years ago?
The curricular revision for math started 3 years ago,
Oh, 3 years
correct?
ago.
This past year was our first year implementing integrated math 1.
Okay.
And then this year we are doing integrated math 2.
So we're just going to start seeing some results one way or the
Yeah.
other.
So again, our integrated math 1 last year finished its first year of implementation, and again, we exceeded the MAP national norm in terms of growth and achievement for subgroups as well. We saw some really significant common assessment student achievement data that exceeded our expectations. We didn't see our ACT trend the way we needed it to, but again, this hasn't impacted our juniors at this point in time, so we weren't anticipating we would see the impact in terms of student achievement around our ACT. But again, the MAP data, which is the standardized measure for math in our freshmen, we did see significant increase in student achievement data. And again, when we talk to teachers about that, we look at it's a guaranteed curriculum aligned to a resource that's been vetted by experts in the field. They partnered with the Dana Center, which is the leading math institute in the nation. They receive high-level professional training. So, I mean, this is really high-quality work that they're doing, and again, to see that pay off has been really, really huge.
Thank you.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, so you pointed out that potentially there could be too many options for the students to choose in that far right bottom group there, right? And so are you having discussions about addressing that? Is part of that discussion maybe combining some of those or eliminating some of those options? Especially, and I'd hate to have something come to fruition and we don't have enough prep time for teachers, and, or now all of a sudden we have an offering, but we just don't have enough kids to really have a class. So it'd be nice to try and avoid some of those things happening.
Yep, absolutely. So we, tonight we came to you with the UBDs, the syllabus for the integrated 3 classes. We'll be coming to you about a year from now with the proposal for what that senior year menu will look like. So the teachers really right about now, going into the spring of this year, we will be having those conversations and determining what the sequence will look like for implementation in the 24-25 school year.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Moore?
Thank you. I do like the options for some of the courses that are only offered semester. That way, if students do want to take it a 4th year, they may not want to take a whole year because every student is not a STEM student. For me, for example, I just want to get out, so 3 years is enough for me. But having that push, like you said, is very important, and maybe that push is just a semester course for those students who just, math is maybe not their strong suit, but they challenge themselves to take another course. So I like the fact that not a whole year course for all the courses are not a whole year. I like the fact that there are some options for students to take a semester if they choose to. So that is very attractive to me, and I hope it is for your students as well.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? I don't see any. Next steps, Rachel?
Yep, so I'll be back in October for seeking approval of the UBDs for these courses. And so in between now and then, if you have any course-specific questions, I will look for making sure, to your points, Dr. Piasek, that we talk to some of those counselors and make sure, again, that we're not unintentionally putting students in a track that they can't move in and out of. But then I'll be coming back in October for approval of those UBDs.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is under Key Performance Indicators, and we have Jen Gennerman with us tonight, our District Instructional Data Specialist, who, with Mrs. Landish, will be talking to us about our KPI dashboard. Welcome.
Hi, good evening.
I feel like we met you already
Hi, nice
via
to meet
video,
you
but
all.
welcome.
I was going to introduce her, but I don't need to. Thank you for that warm welcome. It is her first time in front of the board, right? I know she's going to knock it out of her park, but be easy on her. She's got some great news to share. I just want to thank her personally for her dedication to this dashboard, along with Mary Jo King. They have been working tirelessly to make sure that this is now a live dashboard as of this week. And so she'll navigate you through where it can be located on the website and talk to you about our timelines and things like that. So very excited that she's with us.
Thank you. So good evening. Like I shared in my recorded presentation, we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes, just verifying where the data is coming from and just collecting it and organizing it in a way that it's not reliant on one person, and that as the future goes on, we have a common source, a common language that we're using. So tonight I really wanted to highlight really that live piece that Jody had talked about. With each of the key performance indicators for teaching and learning, not only do we have a live piece, but we have a reporting out timeline that was shared, and you can see here. I have to say that all of these are tentative because typically the state report card is, shared at this time, and so depending on how board meetings are scheduled and the release date of information, that might be adjusted, but that is our best guess based on timelines of the past of when we'd be providing you an update on those KPI data indicators, because they all will come at different times. As far as the website, these are the steps that you can go, and I'll walk you through it. But there's no new additional site. It's really from the Key Performance Indicator website that we had before. So we're just going to the menu and then scrolling down to the Key Performance Indicators. And then this is where you'll have your choice to click on different dashboards. And I'm just going to go to it now. So here we have the larger information about all the key performance indicators, and then the new addition on the right is the dashboard piece. You'll see that teaching and learning is there, and under the other areas it does say under development, so that will be pieces that will be coming in the future. As far as all the teaching and learning key performance indicators, what we've done is collected the data and really organized in a way that we can share with each of you and community, you know, where we're at with each of the key performance indicators. This then becomes our landing page for all of teaching and learning, starting with, you know, the DPI report card and scrolling through all the way through a key performance indicator around having a GPA of 2.8 or higher, as well as our goal around ACT, and then also the forward exam looking at ELA as well as math, and then our goal around our English language proficiencies and tracking the student success there. So, it's a work in progress. Teaching and learning, we kind of have that, but we'll move on to other parts. But we're open for feedback or discussion. Just really wanted to share this and make it available.
Very exciting step. Mrs. Kozlowski.
This is outstanding. It looks great. I appreciate all of the hard work. I love the visual representation. It makes it very easy for the user. It shares with all of our parents and our teachers where we're at. I think this is excellent.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Well, I'm super excited. I'm more excited than you. I'm as excited as you. What a great way to end the meeting, right? If we end it here. I do want to say though too, the timeline that Jennifer mentioned, right, in her presentation. Carrie, I'm thinking about PALS, and what my note here is I'm going to go back and meet with Jen and talk about how we can fit in PALS into that timeline, right? So it's another assessment that we can bring to the board and highlight the data around. So that'll be an easy piece for us to do. Just want to make mention of that.
I mean, obviously, there's so much behind every one of our KPIs, right? And that's the whole point, is that they're key performance indicators, but all the other data doesn't go away in that process. So I think this is a really nice way that we've got it all. I mean, the whole community, we have it all at our fingertips, and we can hold ourselves accountable. And we know it takes time to move some of these numbers, but having them in front of us is the first step, so.
And having that clear timeline, because it can be confusing, because you would think like a school report card or a student report card comes out at the same time and you have all your measures, and that's just not the case. So it's really hard to, if you're not in education, understand that at different times in the school year, there's all different data that we're getting, and we use a combination of that to really drive our indicators to move us forward. So I think that will be helpful even for me to plan my work and bring to you, so.
That's great. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you for that.
Yep.
Really positive update. Last on our agenda would be recommendations for future meetings. Any topics proposed? Okay. Oh, Mrs. Kozlowski.
So, favorite topic. One of the things that we've been going through over the last 4 months is introduction and approval of a lot of great curriculum, right, with the focus on academic achievement. But the one part for me still is the unknown variable is our apps, right? So it's how many of our apps have we formerly been using to enhance teaching because we didn't have the strong curriculum, and now many of the curriculum is just being implemented this year. But I do think it's a really important time for us to take a look at these apps soon in the school year, because in the event that we can start to say the new curriculum that we are spending a lot of money on is now outdated or it's being overlapped, and we have an opportunity to be more thoughtful about what do we still need, what do we not, and how that looks. I think that before we get to, like I've talked a lot about, the waiting before it's spent, it's the thoughtful review of we're doing so much to enhance and give the staff better tools to teach, that do the apps then have an opportunity to fall back? I don't have that without having the review, but I think we need to start doing that sooner than later.
Thank you. I know that we've talked a little bit about looking, not a little bit, actually quite extensively, about looking at the entire portfolio and the budget on an annual basis. And what I hear you asking for is maybe looking at that inventory of apps as soon as possible, and then we kind of fall into that annual cycle at least of reviewing, approving that whole portfolio. So we'll make a note of that. Thank you. All right. Anything else? With that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.